Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And in this one, we've got a couple of interviews with the head honcho, Ian Hazzikostas, that have to do with World of Warcraft and the future of the game. This is one of the few interviews that goes really deep into systems and the possibilities of World of Warcraft 2 in the near future. And as always, if you want to stay up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, educational and entertaining content, then make sure to smash the subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. Now, obviously, Classic has just been released, and we're going to have Mists of Pandaria Classic. We're going to have progression servers into the Burning Crusade Classic. China currently has Wrath of the Lich King Classic, and retail has been underway with the War Within. So there are more versions of World of Warcraft ever, and how sustainable is that going to be, or what are some of the lessons that they've been learning throughout all of these journeys is basically what we're going to be covering. So in this first interview, it discusses rewards, and rewards are a big deal, right? This is like the main primary motivating factor for the game. This has also been a really big issue in things like PvP with MMR. So I'm curious to see what he has to say as far as like currencies, not being enough. We can always buff the rewards. We're never going to nerf the rewards, really, right? If things go out too fast and generous, we'll never pull that back. So he's talking about the coins basically for the 20th anniversary event, but this can also be tied into Dragonflight, where when they gave us a bunch of MMR, people were 3,600 rating by the first couple of months of the season, and you can't really dial that back once Pandora's out of the box. It's you can't really put it back in, and that's been the big issue since Dragonflight Season 1, is that rating was allowed to go so massively high that players kind of expect that to be the new norm. And now with it being squished down as much as it is, which is where they would have liked it to be for the norm, the expectations are kind of ruined on that front, which is why for me, I think they need to completely revamp the ranking system in a future expansion in order to kind of get our expectations with where we're supposed to be as far as rating more in alignment. So while playing a bit of that guessing game, of trying to pick the right values, we may tend to err on the conservative side. So this is when they gave us like barely any tokens. Hopefully the players understand we'll be fast and responsive if we feel like we've missed the mark. If we hear the feedback from the community loud and clear. So if something is going the way that you don't like, make a lot of Twitter posts. Because as soon as everybody was talking like, hey, we're not getting enough of these tokens, like they were pretty quick to like, all right, everything gets tokens now. There you go. We're ready to go. So if something is a problem, definitely raise it up as feedback. They have been very responsive to it. Would it be nice if it just came out perfectly? Yeah, of course. But they have been very receptive to, jumping on top of things when it isn't, or it doesn't happen to be the case. So whenever you're in a position like that, just always bring up that fact, really, that if you bring feedback forward, it seems like you just need to make enough of a ruckus, at least on social media, that something is likely going to happen. In the case of the 20th anniversary event, it was a broader issue. However, with the War Within being a fresh expansion, players were still not out of the main expansion loop, having to still run their character power-focused activities every week. This left players feeling overwhelmed by having to do their weekly chores for their vaults on top of the 20th anniversary activities. And this is the thing that didn't make any sense for, right? It's like, it's the 20th anniversary. Everything in WoW should reward you towards that event. And if you've got extra time and you want to explore that new stuff, or that's the only stuff you want to do, then it's great that it's there as an option. But the fact that it felt mandatory because nothing else was getting significant tokens seems like, well, obviously they agreed because they switched it and revamped it. So I think that's the most important takeaway from this, is that if you provide enough loud feedback about it, that they seem to be very responsive to it. Hopefully that means MMR will get another jump here pretty soon for PvP. So when we look at something like the 20th anniversary, there's quite a lot to do there. And there's a lot that's fresh and novel that the players will enjoy over the course of 11.0.5. At the same time, we want to ensure people aren't running out of reasons to do content that they would otherwise want to do too soon. Even if they really enjoyed the 20th anniversary event, there was this sense of, I already had been spending a bunch of time doing dungeons and delves and leveling these other alts. This feels like too much to ask on top of that. That's the part we hadn't grasped until we heard the feedback loud and clear when live. And that goes back into like even older expansions when they're like, okay, you have to do island expeditions and you have to do the world quest and you have to do this, and you're just, adding in all of this stuff that you have to do weekly to maintain your character, and people burn out and they can't maintain their schedules, they can't organize their group play, and then also deal with all these, extra activities on top of it that feel mandatory, especially if their rewards are way higher than the latter. So I think it's good that they are responding in this way and not forcing us to basically do it. Overall, launching an event the size of the 20th anniversary a mere 56 days or 8 weeks after an expansion launch might have been too early, as an expansion launch keeps players busy longer than a regular season launch. Meanwhile, the 8-week cycle seems to work well with other seasons, as Blizzard seems to be continuing the Dragonflight cadence with 11.0.7 scheduled to release on December 17th, 56 days after the launch of 11.0.5, which is an important detail as far as like trying to track possible patches, season end dates, and trying to plan for future content, is that they seem to be pretty just like, factory level manufacturing the expansions and the patches out now, and they are following a similar benchmark to what we were seeing for Dragonflight. Now, the main point of discussion for this is World of Warcraft 2. Ian Hazzikostas talks about the future of WoW with Games Radar Plus. So World of Warcraft 2 is the big thing everybody's talking about. I think whenever you hear that, what you're thinking is like classic WoW going somewhere other than the Burning Crusade, and maybe instead of the Burning Crusade talent editions, they come up with new talents to string onto the end of the talent trees. That's what I think most people picture in their head, is like, we don't go through the Dark Portal, we go to Mount Hyjal, we go to some other area, maybe a Naga area or something like that instead. So I'm curious to see what they have to say about it, if it's going to align with that. I think that's why a lot of players, at least with Season of Discovery, it didn't hit with an alignment with that, although there are some new raids coming to Season of Discovery, with I think the Karazhan Crypts and something to do with the Scarlet Crusade. It kind of seems like the hype for Season of Discovery is already over, and now we're just blasting out new stuff for it that would have been more in that vein. And also, given that Classic Fresh just came out, I'm assuming that those are very like similar audiences. It's probably tough to pull those back, given that it's already basically been released. But let's see what they have to say. When asked about the long-term future of WoW and if Blizzard considers it necessary to wipe the slate clean to keep the game healthy in the long run, it's interesting to wipe the slate clean, because for me, I think one of the main reasons World of Warcraft is still like the number one MMORPG is that player investment. Their mounts, their titles, their achievements, their memories in the game, in the zones with their characters and the characters of the game. That's a huge reason that they stay playing it, and they don't just hop onto the next one and stay there permanently. Everyone always comes back to WoW, even when there's new hype, is because of that investment. So to remove and wipe that investment is a huge risk. It is a huge risk to undertake. So I'm interested to see where they go with this, but I would find it hard to believe that they'd be in alignment with this. Theoretically, at some long, distant point down the line, that may be a question we grapple with seriously. But for the time being, we have a huge, vibrant, and growing player community that we're excited to serve. So basically, this means if the game ever, for some reason, stopped being profitable with their current metrics, then they would likely consider it. And this is kind of in line with answers that he says all the time, is like, never say never, because it's into the future. You say something now, and then 5 years later, like, oh, it does make sense to actually do that, we're going to do it. And if you say never, we're never going to do that, then it obviously doesn't fall in alignment. So I think that makes sense here, but it doesn't seem like it would happen anytime soon. And I mean, even for myself, predicting like WoW's profitability, given that all these re-releases and how hyped they are and how much traffic they're driving and all the mounts they're selling and China going back into the market, it's seeming like it's probably pretty slim to none, but let's see what else they have to say. We're constantly tearing out some of the old foundational system and replacing it with something that was scaled to support our new server architecture, to support new graphics pipelines, interesting, new graphics, to support new aspects of multiplayer interaction that the original game couldn't have imagined. So they kind of already are kind of working on WoW 2 while also maintaining everyone's personal investment into the game. But I think what's happening with this is that there's a lot of bugs that are happening as they're doing this, because WoW's engine is so old, and you've probably experienced a lot of those bugs. I think it was like last week, you could like run through walls in the arena at the start of the game for a little bit, and like all the bugs and the haywire stuff that happened at 11.0.5's launch. So that's maybe the cost that comes with not making a WoW 2, is that you gotta stamp out a lot of bugs as the ship's hull is basically expanding and exploding, and you're plugging up holes in the ship as fast as possible, but they just keep happening. When we have this vibrant world full of millions of players, our priority is to keep serving them as best we can, to keep extending those journeys, the worlds we build, and every step along the way, we're making the improvements that we think suit the modern audience the best. So they're going to be really responsive to feedback. We just got to be, baby raging on Twitter like a bunch of WoW Karens, and they're likely going to be really responsive to it. It also basically means, I think, as long as it continues to be profitable, it's unlikely. And I think that makes sense when you consider that Overwatch was originally Titan. That was going to be an MMORPG. They scrapped it, and then they were going to do PvE content for Overwatch, and then they scrapped it. So it's like, you're going to create a competitor for your own MMORPG when it's in a position where it's already still currently the number one MMORPG. It would just be a huge risk. It would be a huge investment and a huge risk for something in a situation where like they're already profitable enough that why would they? But it continues here. In the interview, he also remarks that while we might never see a WoW 2, we almost already have that, with Classic offering different versions of the game with a snapshot from the past. According to the senior game director, while there are players who enjoy multiple versions of the game, for the most part, players stick to only one version they prefer, and that's because the systems are so dramatically different, right? There are players playing Classic WoW for the socialization, they're playing it for the character progression, and they like that slow grind of working towards ultimately an endpoint. Whereas on retail, players are focused on competition, kind of like scaling their ability at the game and climbing rankings and climbing leaderboards. And those are the two differences between them. And ultimately, at least based off my analysis, having been involved with the WoW community for this long, is that it seems like no game is immune to kind of like boom and bust. It's just insanely popular for a month or two, and then no one's playing it and everyone's talking about how dead it is, and then the next thing's out and it just keeps repeating, and everybody keeps repeating the same thing over and over. And it doesn't matter how happy or how good it is, or because now we're seeing everybody talk about how amazing Classic is again and how bad retail is. But then at the beginning of the War Within, everyone was talking about how great retail is now and all the changes they've made. So it's like people just have no memory at all. It's like our attention spans are being ruined by TikTok. And this is just something that every game is now susceptible to. So I think with the cycle that they've got, where it's like, hey, new Classic content when retail's starting to go down, because it's going to go down no matter how good it is, and then when Classic content starts to go down, because no matter what it's eventually going to, then there's new retail content, that they've got a pretty good cadence to keep printing moving into the future. Ian Hazakostas, Classic is a testament to the amount of change that's happened and the amount of evolution in World of Warcraft over this time. Technically, it's the same game now turning 20. There's been a tremendous amount of diversions and evolution over time, and that's only going to continue. So it seems like WoW 2 is unlikely unless for some reason they became so unprofitable. But it's like, if WoW became that unprofitable, would they invest in making a new MMORPG? Probably depends on competition, right? I could also see, because I think it's, MMORPG is like a genre of music. There's a set number of people that like it, and it's a very small amount of new people that are likely getting into it. So you're competing with all existing MMORPGs. They're the number one MMORPG. Why are they going to change anything? Why are they going to reprint? Why are they going to make a new one when they're already number one? I don't think that ever really happens until there's a competitor that actually takes their audience permanently away from them. And that has yet to happen. And maybe Riot will be that competition. Maybe that's what will steer it into that direction. Time will tell. Time will tell on that front. But that's basically it here for these interviews. I wanted to dive a little bit more into detail with it. Let me know what you're most excited about with World of Warcraft. Are you going to be diving into MoP? For me, that was when I really got into competitive PvP. I started to see my success there. I qualified for the North American Regionals. My commentating career started off in Miss Pandaria, so I've got like a lot of sentimental value towards that. Balance Druid had a lot of really fun class changes as well for it in that expansion, so I'm very excited to try it out. But let me know what you guys are thinking. What's got you most excited? Are you disappointed by this? Did you guys really want a World of Warcraft 2? Or do you see like my point of view here? Let me know if you agree or disagree. But thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.